In 1986, which I understand is a long time ago, unfortunately, I had moved from my dumb job at Channel 13 in Newark, New Jersey, to a producer job at CBS News working on Sunday Morning, which I hope you watched this morning. The show looks exactly the way it did 30 years ago, remarkably. Anyway, as the new guy at Sunday Morning, I really didn't know the ropes yet. And so, I was hanging out in the office looking for stuff to do. And immediately, it was around Thanksgiving. And of course, on network television, we do homeless stories on Thanksgiving and Christmas. The rest of the time, we really don't care about homeless people. But Thanksgiving and Christmas, we do the homeless story. And so being the new guy, they said, Rosenblum, you do the homeless story. Well, fine. You know what? Homeless stories are easy to do, except they're hard to find people because they're not at home. But living in Manhattan, I can go out my door here and go to Fifth Avenue and I can find 100 homeless people, or at least a dozen, without too much difficulty. But being CBS News, they wanted to do America and not, Manhattan, which they don't consider to be, nobody really considers to be part of America. Even people who live in Manhattan don't consider to be part of America. So I had to go find a homeless person who lived in America, which is not that hard to do. So I went to Rizzoli's, which was a big bookstore in Manhattan, and I found a book called We the Homeless by Stephanie Holliman. She was one of my VJs later at VNI, and she's still a friend of mine on Facebook, and she lives on a boat in San Francisco. She got a great life. Anyway, she was a photographer. She did a book called We the Homeless, which was about homeless people across America. This is about godsend. So I looked through the book, and I found a photograph she'd done of some homeless woman who lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. CBS News, perfect. The dead center of America, Trump land today. But in those days, middle America, great, homeless person in Tulsa. So I flew out to Tulsa by myself, because that's what the producer does. The producer goes and finds the story. And thanks to Stephanie, I got associated with this church guy who was helping homeless people. And he introduced me to this woman, we'll call her Mary. And she had a job. She worked at Circle K, which is some, food thing, a store thing. And before, she had a dog grooming business, and she had been married, and she lost the husband, and she lost her home, and she ended up living in a car, and then they repossessed the car, and now she was living in a cardboard box under an overpass. I mean, a real perfect homeless story. And she was articulate, and she could tell her story. She was most homeless people have psychological problems. We don't want them on TV. We just want people who look like you and me but happen to be homeless so everyone can relate. Perfect. Casting is everything in television. So I found the homeless person. I spent a day with her under the overpass. We talked. She was great. She had a great story to tell. I was all set. Now, if I had been a newspaper reporter or a radio correspondent with a tape recorder, I would have been done because I was there. I did the interview. I got the sound bites. I got the story. But being television, of course, I needed the crew. We don't use crews around here. We use VJs, and you get your own camera. That's another story. But in those days, you needed the crew. So I called New York, and I said, hey, I got the homeless person, let's go. And they said, great. So they sent the crew from Chicago, which was the nearest bureau. So these two guys arrived, the cameraman and the audio guy, and I go and meet them at the airport in Tulsa, and they each get a Lincoln Continental for rental. First, they got 1 million boxes full of crap. I have no idea, but you've seen these guys, giant boxes and cameras, tripods and lights, and all kinds of crap that they drag around with them. So I met them at the airport, and each one of them got their own Lincoln Continental, a big car, because they got all this junk to carry. And apparently, according to union rules, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, they said each of them was entitled to a Lincoln. So they get the Lincolns. And so they get the Lincolns. And then we start to shoot some B-roll. This is background material and stuff like that. And we shoot some footage of poor people and all kinds of crap like that. And then it's time to get the correspondent has to arrive. So I call New York, and in this case, Bob Pierpoint, who had been the White House correspondent, he's flying out, and I meet him at the airport, and he gets off the plane. He goes, I hate these damn homeless stories. I said, me too, Bob. But what are we going to do? It's all done. We got to get this thing done. And of course, Bob has to get a Lincoln because the cameraman has a Lincoln and the sound guy has a Lincoln, so he can't have a smaller car than the crew has. So now we got 3 Lincolns, and we all go off. Well, first we go check out the homeless woman who's still in the box. Luckily, she hasn't gone to Miami for the summer. She's still in the box under the overpass, and we say hello to her, and I go, this is Bob Pierpoint, famous television person. Maybe you recognize him. Maybe you've been watching him on TV.
if you had a TV in your box, which you probably don't. So, so the three of us, the four of us, the cameraman, the sound man, Bob, and I, we go off to the Intercontinental or whatever it is where we're staying, and we have lunch. We don't take the homeless person because that would corrupt the story. I mean, taking her and buying her lunch, obviously that's checkbook journalism. So we have lunch, and then we go back to do the interview with the homeless lady. Now, before we do the interview, we have to do the stand-up. This is considered the most important part of television with big stars and big reporters. And so it's where you see the guy walk around and sort of pontificate to the camera. So Bob turns to me, and the guy's been in the business for years, and he says, "What should I say?" And I said, "Bob, why don't you say what we always say?" And he says, "What's that?" And I said, "Why don't you say, it's criminal that in the wealthiest country in the world, people have to live like this." And you can point at her. He goes, "That's good, write that down." So I go in the back of the Lincoln and I take a yellow pen and I write out, "It's criminal that here in the wealthiest country in the world, people have to live like this." And I give it to Bob. And Bob looks at it, he goes, "Good." And then he takes out a little tape recorder and it records another thing. "It's criminal that here in the wealthiest country in the world, people have to live like this." He puts the tape recorder in his pocket and he runs a wire up into his ear like this so that he can hear, he can't remember it, so he can hear the thing. And then we do like 30 takes of him walking along going, "It's criminal that here in the..." We have to shoot it like this so you don't see the wire. He says, "It's criminal that here in the wealthiest country in the world, people have to live like this. It's criminal that..." Of course, the lady in the box is watching the whole thing happen, and she's got nothing else to do. And so we do a take after take after take, and then after we do like maybe 30 takes with different angles and different pauses, "It's criminal. It's criminal that here. It's criminal that here." There's lots of options with this thing. Anyway, then we go, the three of us, Bob and me and the cameraman, sit in the back of one of the Lincolns, I don't remember which one, and we play the tape back to look at it to make sure we got a good take. And we go, "I like that. Number 12, oh, that's good. Number 15, that was really good." When we get that done, then we take a little coffee break, and then we go back to do the interview with the homeless lady. And so they wire her up, and they got the sound guy with the microphone, they got the radio mic on him, and they got the angle here, and they got the thing here, and the camera. It's like takes forever. And then finally they get the whole thing done, and they start to do the interview, and Bob starts to ask the questions, like, "Tell me your story." And the sound guy is going like this, because the sound of the cars from the overpass, where she happens to live, and this is the common noise to get there. So finally, after trying this and trying that, they say, "This doesn't work. So what are we going to do now?" So now we move the homeless lady down to a cafe, down the thing. They put lights, they hang lights from the ceiling, they gel the windows so they don't get a different color balance problem. And they finally do this stupid interview with her, and the thing is over. And then, of course, Bob, he's done with the interview, he did the stand-up, he splits. And so for the next day, we go back to the Intercontinental. The next day, the camera crew and I get up. We shoot some B-roll of the lady in the box. Of course, people who live in a box don't do a lot. So we have her, "Could you walk here? Could you go here?" I mean, it's all fake stuff. And then after that, we need more footage because these Sunday morning pieces of business. We have to talk about poverty in America. So we get in the car, one of the Lincolns, and we go driving around. None of us know Tulsa. And we're hanging out the windows going, "Hey, where do the poor people hang out?" "Well, they're over there on the other side of the railroad tracks." So, okay, so we take it and we drive. You've seen shots like this, where the car, the like poor part of town, and the bad part of town's going by like this. And the reason is the cameraman is hanging out the window, shooting the stuff, and the sound guy's driving along. Nobody wants to get out. You could get hurt. You could get robbed. So we stay in the car, and we shoot the thing, and then the evening comes, and we see these guys warming their hands over like a trash fire. And I can't go, "Well, that's great, let's get that." So from a distance, we zoom in on that, and then I go, and we're done. And then I go back to New York, and of course I got all this footage, and I sit down and I write the whole script out like that, and I put it together, and I call Bob and I say, "I got the script." And so he says, "Well, come down to D.C., because that's where I am, we'll record it." So I fly down to D.C., and I give him the script that I wrote, and he records the thing, and we put the whole thing together, and it airs, and everybody goes, "Whoa, what a wonderful piece. I want to help this woman." On this kind of... The thing was a tissue of I said lies. It was crap. It was incredibly complicated. It was incredibly expensive. It was ridiculous. It's ridiculous to do journalism like this. Did it reflect anything about this woman's real life? Nah, not really. What it reflected was the attitudes of, Bob Pierpoint and what he wanted to say, and what, let's look at some poor people for a while, and that was pretty much it. I didn't quit then. It took me 2 more years to get my act together and quit and say, "I don't want to do this." I don't want to do this. I mean, the only time I felt like I was doing real journalism was when I was there by myself with this woman under the overpass, or like Stephanie Holloman doing her book, who she just lived with her, and photographed her. So what we were seeing on television that was presented as journalism was essentially just self-indulgent crap, and very expensively, very complicated way of putting it together. The painful thing is that I think it's still done the same way now, which is just terrible. Just terrible. So I wanted to find a new way of making television journalism, and that's what I spent the last 30 years doing. So there are different ways of doing it, and we'll try and find another way. But I got to tell you, when I watch Sunday Morning now, it's lovely. It's beautifully shot. They have nice pictures. They do nice stories. They do nice music. But I can see it's still done in the same really terrible and fake way. So don't believe everything you see on television. And that's my message for Sunday afternoon. I'll talk to you later. Bye.